The Korean War, often called the Forgotten War, was anything but forgettable for the millions who lived, fought, and died through its brutal years from 1950 to 1953. This was a war born from the ashes of World War II. Dividing a nation, testing global powers, and shaping the balance of the modern world. After Japan's surrender in 1945, Korea, which had been under Japanese rule for 35 years, was suddenly liberated, but freedom came with division. The victorious Allies split the peninsula along the 38th parallel. The North fell under Soviet influence, the South under American guidance. Two Koreas emerged, each claiming to be the rightful ruler of all Korea. In the North, Kim Il-sung, a Soviet-backed guerrilla fighter, rose to power as premier of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the South. Syngman Rhee, a staunch anti-communist and U.S.-educated leader, took the presidency of the Republic of Korea. Both sides prepared for reunification by force if necessary. By 1950, tensions had reached a breaking point. On June 25, 1950, North Korean troops stormed across the 38th parallel, launching a massive surprise invasion of the South. Backed by Soviet tanks and weapons, the North's army quickly overran Seoul, the South Korean capital. The world watched in shock. U.S. President Harry Truman, alarmed by the spread of communism after China's fall in 1949, moved quickly. The United Nations Security Council, while the Soviet Union was temporarily absent, approved military intervention to defend South Korea. Thus began one of the bloodiest conflicts of the Cold War. The North Korean advance was devastating. By August 1950, United Nations and South Korean forces were pushed back to a small corner of the peninsula known as the Pusan Perimeter. Conditions were desperate. Supplies ran low. Casualties mounted. But under the leadership of General Douglas MacArthur, a daring plan was set in motion. Instead of fighting head-on, MacArthur proposed a bold amphibious assault deep behind enemy lines at Inchon, near Seoul. On September 15, 1950, MacArthur's gamble paid off. U.S. Marines and UN forces landed at Inchon under heavy fire, but quickly captured the port. The operation cut off North Korean supply lines and trapped thousands of enemy soldiers. Seoul was liberated within weeks. By October, UN forces crossed the 38th parallel and advanced deep into North Korea, a move that would change everything. As UN troops neared the Yalu River, the border with China, warnings came from Mao Zedong. China feared a hostile U.S.-backed force on its border. Ignoring the warning, MacArthur pushed forward. Then, in late October 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese People's Volunteer Army soldiers poured into Korea under cover of night. The effect was catastrophic. UN forces were overwhelmed, suffering heavy losses in freezing mountain battles such as the Chosin Reservoir. MacArthur wanted to expand the war, even suggesting the use of atomic weapons against China. President Truman refused, fearing a Third World War. In April 1951, Truman relieved MacArthur of his command, a controversial but pivotal decision. By mid-1951, the war had become a stalemate around the 38th parallel, the same line where it began. Both sides dug deep trenches reminiscent of World War I battles for small hills such as Heartbreak Ridge, Bloody Ridge, and Pork Chop Hill cost thousands of lives with little territorial gain. The harsh Korean winters and torrential monsoon summers made survival itself a battle. Prison camps swelled with captives, and millions of Korean civilians were displaced or killed. Negotiations for peace began at Panmunjom in July 1951. But fighting continued for 2 more years as both sides argued over prisoner exchanges and border lines. Among the key figures of the war were General Douglas MacArthur, whose Inchon landing turned the tide but whose ambition led to his dismissal. General Matthew Ridgway, who replaced MacArthur and stabilized UN forces, restoring morale and defense. President Harry Truman, who made the hard call to limit the war. Kim Il-sung, whose dream of unifying Korea under communism set the war in motion. Syngman Rhee, who resisted any peace that didn't guarantee full reunification. And Mao Zedong, whose intervention turned the conflict into a superpower showdown. Their decisions shaped not just Korea's fate, but the course of the entire Cold War. By the time the armistice was signed on July 27, 1953, the devastation was staggering. Over 1.2 million South Korean military and civilian deaths, around 1.6 million North Korean military and civilian deaths, nearly 37,000 American soldiers killed and more than 100,000 wounded. Chinese casualties estimated between 400,000 and 900,000. In total, over 4 million people lost their lives, the majority of them Korean civilians. No peace treaty was ever signed. Technically, the two Koreas remain at war to this day. The war left the Korean peninsula in ruins. Cities were flattened, industries destroyed, and families divided by the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ. Yet from the ashes, South Korea would rise as one of Asia's most dynamic economies, fueled by U.S. aid, determination, and decades of rebuilding. North Korea, meanwhile, turned inward, becoming one of the most isolated and militarized nations on Earth for the United States. The Korean War marked a permanent military presence in Asia and set the precedent for Cold War conflicts like Vietnam. It also strengthened Western alliances, leading to the expansion of NATO and a surge in U.S. defense spending. Today, the Korean War is often overshadowed by World War II and Vietnam, yet its legacy continues. The DMZ remains one of the most heavily fortified borders in the world. Families remain divided, and the echoes of 1950 still shape geopolitics, with nuclear tensions on the Korean peninsula. The Korean War was never officially declared. It ended not with victory, but with survival. And in that survival, on both sides lies the story of a people's endurance and a world forever changed by the cost of ideology and war. Over 70 years later, the Korean War remains unfinished.